Yeah, so basically the situation goes kind of like this. I grew up in like IFB, so it's like Independent Fundamental Baptist. If you're familiar with it, it's real conservative Christian, like,
Mhm.
the world's gonna end, and, girls only can wear dresses, no rock and roll, the whole nine. Right? So
Yeah.
growing up in that, I was introduced to like answers in Genesis and all that. Became like, I guess you could call it like a teen apologist, basically. So like all my peers at public school, it was kind of like my mission field was my public school, right? But going through looking at the evidence, I realized there were a lot of errors and contradictions and scientific problems with the Bible and logical problems and so on, right? So then over, time, I lost my faith and kind of became a bit bitter towards the Christian religion and became very hardcore, angry atheist kind of guy. But herein lies the struggle because I started looking at things a little differently several years ago. And I think my skepticism towards a lot of the values that I had embraced with such a zeal began kind of around like the COVID era policies. I deep dived it. And the more I looked into whether it was the lockdown, the vaccine, just different claims that were supposedly supported by the science, and that all the atheist peers I had, you know, held to so vigorously and demonized anybody on the other side of things, I found myself more in line politically and socially with people who religiously I differed from. And so now, you know, I'm in a new town. I have a fiance now. We're looking to build connections. And she's a religious person. And she started going to a church. And several of the people who attend that church, we've become friends with and things of that nature. And I found that like I almost have to kind of put on a front when I'm with them. But then I also don't feel, connected. But I also kind of
Right.
feel the same way. Yeah, I feel the same way when, I hang out with people that are, in like the secular community in my area because it becomes such a like, you know, we're gonna bash anybody who could ever have any conservative thought ever. And it just turns into that all day long. And, my own political
Uh,
perspective has go ahead.
all right. So if you're looking for, say, conservative leaning atheists, they are out there and you can find them. It could be that perhaps you're not looking in certain places, but like I'm not quite sure. You're basically saying that you can't find people with the right mix of beliefs that like jive with yours. You feel like you're either putting on a show or butting heads with them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I feel like I want to be able to just, it was nice when I was a Christian because
Right.
everybody was like me. They agreed. And it was nice when I was an angry atheist because everybody was like me. But now that I'm still like an atheist, but like, I'm not going to bash somebody who doesn't want to get a fourth booster. But it's like
I wanna
those
say,
kinds of conversations.
yeah, I want to say
Right.
you want to be careful not to paint people with such a broad brush because you might come up with these characterizations of people or groups of people in your mind and saying that these like the only options. People are very nuanced in lots of different things, and yeah, social interactions and creating friendships and bonds are dependent on certain things aligning, and there are other things that don't have to align. Like I have friends that I disagree with politically that I don't mind being friends with. So, like, you might just be hanging out with the wrong people, or maybe you yourself are being a little bit too critical, or a little too like exacting in what you want out of friends. But like you said, if you're in Minnesota, are you near any major cities in Minnesota?
Yeah, Minneapolis.
Okay, so have you used like certain online resources, like I don't know, like Meetup.com, message boards? Like there's groups out there you can probably find that will closely align with yours. And if you don't find somebody, then maybe if it's something that you really value, now you have a choice to make whether, okay, do I stick with my outwardness about my positions, or am I willing to make some compromises with what I say and what I don't say? or how fervently I argue for something, how fervently I don't. And then you can make compromises in order to increase the number of friends you have. But that's a choice that you can make. But is that kind of like what
That's
you're looking at? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I haven't used that particular site, but I have done two different events through message boards with like secular communities. I guess like this question kind of stems from a broader, I guess, disappointment, I would say, in the atheist community, because I feel like what's happened is the
Careful
critical
not to paint with a
thinking, the
broad brush here.
skepticism, the embrace. Well,
Sorry, I just saying, be careful not to paint with a broad brush here because you're about to say this is what I don't like about the atheist community. And the atheist community is a huge group with many differently minded people. So, but anyway, continue. I wasn't
uh,
trying to step on you. Just be careful with that broad brush there.
okay, that's a good point. Let me rephrase. With the atheist community that I have been in contact with, so this could be different in other people's experiences, but in my experience, what I've noticed is that the embrace of like, free expression of ideas and free speech and criticism and criticizing the authority, like the government, and criticizing the people who make decisions and criticizing power, like these these sorts of things were like hallmarks of like the Hitchens sort of like atheism that I really like. And it's been just disappointing, I guess. You know, I like there's been like some of my closest friends from, I guess you could say, like the atheist community, quote unquote. But like there's been some estrangement just because you know, and it's not on my end, but on their end, it's like they don't want to associate with anybody that is even open to criticizing, like I go back to the COVID thing. That was kind of a big point of separation for me. But like, as an example, like the vaccines or something. And for me, it's like, yeah, let's hear all the criticisms and let's put them all on the table and let's evaluate and see. And so it's just that it's been just disappointing, I guess. So if you can maybe speak to your thoughts from your vantage point about racism, and do you think that the atheist communities that you aligned with are less open to criticizing people that are on their political side, quote unquote?
So I do want to say that skepticism, when it's is not synonymous with contrarianism, right? It's not synonymous with relentlessly questioning everything. Skepticism, in broad terms, is about making sure that you have good reasons to believe what you believe. But you absolutely do hold to positions when there is good reason to believe them. So, for example, I'm guessing you are not advocating that there should be a huge group of atheist flat earthers, for example, or atheist
No,
young earthers, right? So, okay,
no,
so but you're granting then that there are certain things for which just skepticism is not mere contrarianism.
yeah,
Okay, so
yeah, I'm granting that.
so you will find there. I don't think that I don't agree with you necessarily that everyone should be open-minded about everything, right? Like I think there are certain issues, and I'm going to leave the ones that you were talking about completely aside, but there are issues for which a person can come to the best possible conclusion that they can come to. So, for example, I think that it's more likely than not that Jesus existed. There are atheists who every single day attack me for being wrong on that position, right? That they think that Jesus absolutely did not exist.
Yeah,
Well, I actually, I feel a little bit like you sometimes. I'm like, oh, why can't we just agree on, or have two people come to different conclusions based on the same evidence? I don't disassociate with mythicists, though. I completely will associate with mythicists, and we can have lively discussions when we so choose about whether that position is correct. But oftentimes we might have say, you know what, we agree on like all these other things. So we're going to hang out and we're going to either not talk about the one thing that we disagree about, or if that one thing is so important to us, then I guess we will just agree to hang out in different groups, right? Like, so let's hang it on that. Political. I live now in a very small town. I used to live in a very large city. I find that when I am in my very local circles, that I don't have as much in common with them, with my neighbors, as I would like. But I also do like to form, I am embracing this part of me that I'm not super comfortable with, and that is making friends with people local to me. That has meant, in some cases, setting aside certain topics, not even political topics necessarily, but just certain topics that we might disagree for the sake of becoming friends. So, those are all things that can be done if and when that social interaction is important enough to you. I would argue, though, also that there are times when sometimes our principles and our ideals are more important than the social interaction. I think you would agree with that, right? That sometimes the ideal is more important than the friendship. And so those are cases where,
in very rare instances, I'm about as pro free expression as you can find.
so then I think you're fair to say if people have said to you, you are holding position Y, and therefore I can't associate with anyone with position Y, they've come to that conclusion. I can actually be behind you where you can say, you know what, that's disappointing. Even if I might also agree that person is justified, I can get why that's disappointing. So I think I can be on board there. I don't know. That's kind of a train of, ramble, as it were. Was anything in there helpful to you? Or
Yeah, no, that was really helpful. I think I did want to correct one kind of, I guess, built-in assumption. So it's not that the difficulty is on my end, where it's like, oh, it's difficult being, friends with or connecting with people who don't embrace, free expression of ideas to the same extent as me or something. What I've noticed is that, for example, I'll give an example. One of my best friends who, for years, an atheist, they had a child, and, my parents, they knew this person. My parents chose not to be vaccinated, and they said, unless you're vaccinated, you can never meet my child. Like, and to me, and like,
So do you
so it's
think,
like, what do I do with a person
so
like?
Tim,
So I know we kind of took. Oh, go ahead.
yeah. So with that particular example, is that
Yeah.
is that a conflict over ideology and positions on things, or do you see that those other people have some very real fear that their child might be exposed to something because that other child isn't vaccinated?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I do think that there's a fear there, but that goes to my point about skepticism, because I think at this point it's not a rational fear, and even if that was something that a person held to at a certain point, I
So
guess
you
again
don't
it's
think
a
it's you don't think
disappointment
it's a
sort of.
rational. So hold on, Tim. I don't mean to cut you off, but you say you don't think it's rational
Yeah. Go ahead.
fear. But what
Yeah.
rational reasons do you think they might have if you were to put yourself in their shoes?
Well, they've explained their reasons. I don't find them compelling. Otherwise, I'd agree with
Okay.
those reasons.
All right,
I
but
mean, their reasons are
it's not a disagreement over. But my point is that it's not a disagreement over a social position or a politics position. It's a disagreement over them saying, "I think this is a very real threat to my child, so I'm not going to allow
yeah.
this threat to present itself." So it has nothing to do really with the disagreement itself. It's the threat that they see to their child, letting their kid hang out with an unvaccinated child. And I know you disagree with that, but that's their motivation, not the disagreement itself. It's the threat that they see. For example, let's say, for example, we've had fresh outbreaks of polio in certain parts of the world. In parts of the world where polio was eradicated, polio has made a comeback. Smallpox has made a comeback. We have very real examples of how lack of vaccinations has presented real threats to children in the world. Now, setting aside whether or not COVID can be included in that group, we have solid evidence of these things occurring. So from those people's point of view,
Wait, can
that you can
I just
understand
jump
at
in
least what they're saying.
briefly on that?
Sure, go ahead.
Just really quickly on that. So that's a great example, right? you can point that out, and I would look at the evidence and I would say, yeah, that's a good example. So somebody should get, I would advocate for a person getting the polio vaccine. But then why is it that, and I wouldn't say you specifically, but many people that I've talked to, if I point out, for example, there were 4 approved COVID vaccines, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, and Pfizer. And after 2.5 years, half of those vaccines are pulled from the market because of adverse heart reactions. That's literally like half of all the approved vaccines of some of the quote unquote most safe. And if I
Tim,
point that out, that's a,
what does that have to do? What does it have to do with whether or not what does it have to do with whether their motivation was fear or not?
No, because it goes to the fact that it's irrational.
That's
to
fine,
link-
but they can be irrational.
Okay, go ahead.
They're allowed to be irrational. What we were pointing out was that their fear, that their shunning, there was not based on a lack of wanting to be social. Their shunning was based on a perceived threat. Now you may well be right. That let's say that you're completely right, and they shouldn't have had that concern. That doesn't change the fact that that was their motivation.
I am right. Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca are off.
Yeah, so that's not the point of the
I'm just saying,
conversation.
I
We're
don't
talking
wanna make more,
motivations.
So
let me, here's the thing,
Tim.
Tim.
Correct.
Go ahead. So Tim, here's the thing. From their point of view, from those parents' point of view, all right, you can ask them,
Yeah.
okay, what's your confidence level that COVID is a very real threat and the vaccines don't work or something like that? And they'll give you some number, okay? Most parents will say, let's say they have 10% confidence that the vaccines don't work, or rather, let me take that back. They have a certain level of confidence, doesn't matter what number it is, that if my child hangs out with an unvaccinated kid, they might catch a very dangerous disease. And maybe that percentage of confidence is 5%. A lot of parents will say that 5% is unacceptable. They may say, I don't believe in vaccines. I don't believe in all this kind of stuff. But just the fact that that small percentage is there and I can't ignore it, that's too much for me to risk my child over some position about a vaccine. So maybe a parent will say, I can't let your children hang out with my children because they're not vaccinated, because there's a 2% chance there that I might be wrong about it. And if a parent were to say that, I would say, okay, that's fine. They're trying to minimize as much as possible any threat to their child. Whether or not the vaccine issue is who's right on that, it doesn't really matter. Is that you should put yourself in their shoes, and even though you disagree with certain facts and certain interpretations of the evidence, you can at least understand what their position is. They're not saying no to you. I'm assuming they're not saying no to you because of your position. They're saying no to you because they see a very real threat to their child.
Fair enough. And I want to, they can make whatever choice they want, but my whole thing is it's just disappointing. But I agree with what you guys said earlier, that maybe the route is just to find my connection with people, not around philosophical things, because I am kind of in a weird niche position of being a non-believing, skeptic of the skeptic community kind of guy. So I think that's a good point, for rock climbing groups or something.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think you're on point. The question of whether someone's an atheist or not is ultimately one of the least interesting questions about a person. So trying to coalesce around that one question has always been strange. So love it. If you like rock climbing, find a rock climbing group. I'm with you.
Yeah. And I can say even right from my point of view, just this is me personally, whenever I'm examining a person to be a new potential friend, whether it be a workmate or somebody I've met recently or somebody in the neighborhood, the last thing that goes through my mind is what's their position on God. I don't even bother answering that question. I ask myself, how does this person behave? How does this person treat others? And is there anything potentially this person does or says that could be a threat to me? Because, let's say we have a person who, I don't know, doubts they completely are skeptical and deny the safety of seatbelts. I would never get into a car with that person who is basically saying, I don't believe in seatbelts, or I don't believe in, stopping at stop signs or something. Those are obviously, very extreme examples. But if I identify a belief in that person that's okay, this could potentially be an issue if I'm not careful about this, I may say, no, I don't want to hang out with this person. But when it comes to the belief thing, when it comes to the Christianity or theism versus atheism thing, it doesn't ever really cross my mind, because I don't have some type of like box that you'd have checked that says atheist when I consider somebody a friend. So you may want to reevaluate your priorities. You may want to look at things and say, okay, I'm willing to make these compromises to get what I want, because it sounds like you want friends. It sounds like you probably, I don't want to call you lonely, but it sounds like you probably want to alleviate some of the isolation you're feeling because you live in an area with religious people and you have a religious family. Re-examine things, re-examine your priorities. Is it really a big deal? Certain things that you examine when you're talking to people, and, course correct, make adjustments. Life's about compromise. If you want to get what you want, you have to make compromises along the way. So,
But I
my
would
advice to you.
affirm, Tim, I hope we didn't encourage you to hang out with people who make you lie about who you are. Because I would say that's
Yeah.
another red flag. If someone forces, if in order to be in a group, you have to lie about who you are, I would say that's a red flag as well. So
That's a good point. I would never associate with somebody and pretend to be a Christian just so I can associate with them. Well, that's just me.
Okay. Yeah. Can I ask one question on the way out?
yeah,
So you guys both grew up in Christian backgrounds, correct?
sounds like very similar to yours.
I think
Okay,
so, but people
so,
tell me I wasn't a Christian, but sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the whole thing apparently. But just, can you guys speak to the denominational differences? Just like what, I guess, what your thoughts on that were when you were a Christian? I'm just curious, like how Christian, or I guess not even when you were a Christian, how you look at that now. Like, do you look at certain Christians as like worse Christians or like better Christians, if that makes sense? Maybe I'm not wording it
Sure.
wrong. Like, do you maybe say like, oh, this guy's a Lutheran, so he's like a tier 2 Christian, but like this guy's like a Presbyterian, so he's like a little bit better? Or is it like, nope, they're
To an,
all
ex- to,
just
to an
wrong?
extent, I'll be much more comfortable with just a generic Catholic than I would with, say, a member of the Westboro Baptist Church. So
Yeah.
you might be able to draw some lines in there, but they would be very like edge case type things, like core Christianity, Lutheran, Catholic, Protestant, Presbyterian. Like if I had 4 people in front of me, each one of them says, you know nothing about me, but I'm a Catholic, I'm a Presbyterian, I'm a blah blah blah, I'd have nothing to work off of to make any judgments about them. But if one guy says, I'm a member of the Westboro Baptist Church, immediately I'm like, this person pickets funerals and I probably don't want to hang out with this person. So yeah, just yes for edge cases, but for core Christianity, it doesn't matter to me at all.
From
Okay.
my perspective, I grew up in a Mennonite community, and it wasn't my generation, but just a generation or two before me, there was literally like the debate was whether you were allowed to have 3 buttons on your jacket or 4 buttons on your jacket, and if you were on the wrong side of the button count, you weren't a real Christian. So that's where I
Wow.
came from, and so I was very much on the virtually no one but my inner circle was Christian. Like, I was very much on that. And I actually, weirdly, I'm now what I would call I've jokingly called myself a Protestant Christian or a Protestant atheist and a sola scriptura atheist, because there are still actually theological positions that if I was ever to slide back, I would have a hard time. Like, I'd have a hard time. I'm much more likely to become a Protestant again than I am to become a Catholic, for example, because of some of that ingrained, I think that one version of it is more ridiculous than another. And I'm definitely not going to go LDS or Mormon, right? Because I think those were even more heretical at the time. So I would have even more obstacles to overcome now. But I currently am now where I think anyone who says they're a Christian is a Christian. And I take them at that face value because it's all about self-identifying. So it would be weird for me, atheist dude, to be a gatekeeper about who is a Christian or not, right? So now I'm much more open and just say, oh, if you say you're a Christian, I'm going to take you at your word that that's the case. Because why would you lie about that? That's a weird thing to lie about. So I don't know if that clarifies anything, but we're all weird, messed up versions of what we were raised by. So it's an interesting question.
It's a shame Christianity wasn't better explained, in some authoritative source. Instead, we have things like the Nicene Creed and other extra biblical documents that, are hard to trace back, hard to verify, hard to see who vetted and authorized these things. And it's like, there's no book that says criteria for being a Christian, 1, 2, 3, you check these 3 boxes and you're a Christian. Like, we don't have anything like that. And so, yeah, we have a lot of issues today where people finger point and say, you're not a Christian. Well, no, you're not a Christian. And yeah, it's a mess. If a God existed, if Christian God existed and he was concerned about there being as many Christians as possible, I think he would have covered this problem before it became a problem. So that's just me though. So, okay. Well, thank you very much, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Appreciate it. Good luck in your journey. And we may disagree on a few things when it comes to the COVID things, but I mean, we all have the very real problems of when it comes to, our social circles and the choices we make with, navigating the world, navigating friendships and family. And we all have to make our decisions for ourselves. So good luck to you and you have a good evening.